As an overview, what's considered the health minimum maintenance dose is 500 milligrams of omega-3s. But when we looked at the European Food and Safety Association, they actually stated that up to 5,000 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acids were deemed a safe and responsible nutrient. And actually, on par, FDA now also states that up to 5,000 milligrams can be a safe and responsible amount.
Welcome to Vitality Radio, the podcast that helps you make sense of natural supplements and thrive without pharma drugs. I'm Jared St. Clair. I grew up in a health food store and spent over 40 years now figuring out what works and what doesn't, so that you can make confident, informed decisions about nutrition, supplements, and your health. Hello and welcome to Vitality Radio, the podcast that helps you master natural supplements, enhance your emotional vitality, and thrive without the use of pharma drugs. My name is Jared St. Clair, and today I'm going to talk to you about omega-3, but I'm not going to do it alone like I typically do, because if you're a regular listener of the show, you already know that omega-3 is part of my Vital 5. You've probably heard me talk about omega-3 a lot because it is one of my favorite supplements and something that I recommend pretty much everybody use on a regular basis. But I had an opportunity to bring someone who's very, very well versed in omega-3 onto the show today. And I want to go ahead and introduce her to you. Her name is Nicole Gitlin, and she's got a passion for health and wellness that was shaped by her own personal journey, which is really typical in this industry. We have lots of people who got into the industry because they needed support with their own health or found answers in natural products and things like that. But Nicole's been busy. She's a certified holistic health practitioner, a certified clinical herbalist, and a certified clinical nutritionist. And she's driven to empower others through impactful science-based education. So I'm super excited to have Nicole on the show. Nicole, welcome to Vitality Radio.
Thank you so much, Jared. I truly appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Well, happy to have you. And of course, it's always good to have somebody from Nordic Naturals on. I would say if there is a name in the industry that's synonymous with fish oil or omega-3, that would be the name, Nordic Naturals. Your company's been doing this for a long, long time. And really, as I see it, I remember the first time we ever had fish oil in a capsule. And I think it was about 15 years old. And we had one of these letter signs out in front of our store. And I was putting up, letters showing that we had omega-3 capsules. Because prior to that, it was just cod liver oil in liquid form. And of course, there's nothing wrong with cod liver oil in liquid form. But back then, it tasted a whole lot worse than it does now. And when it came in capsules, people were like, hallelujah, we have an option that isn't the liquid, right? But that was way before Nordic Naturals even. But when Nordic Naturals jumped in, it was the brand in my book that kind of, tightened everything up around omega-3, cleaned it up, got a lot of education out there, helped people to really understand what was going on, and making sure that there were certain standards that other companies then started to adhere to more in the industry. And those standards are really important because unfortunately, we all know the oceans aren't as clean as we'd like them to be. And so what we have in our omega-3 capsules or omega-3 liquid, we want to make sure meets all the purification that we need and also is fresh and clean and not rancid and all the other things that we have to be concerned about with fish oil. So I've always had a ton of respect for Nordic Naturals and what you guys do as a brand. And so probably I'm trying to think if I've ever had anybody on the show talking about omega-3 that wasn't from Nordic Naturals. I'm not sure that I have. But anyway, super happy to have you on. We're going to hit on omega-3s, the difference between EPA and DHA. That's a question a lot of people ask. We're going to talk about omega-3 for your pets and why that might matter for your loved one, your loved furry friend. And we're also going to talk about the difference between fish oil and omega-3 when we're looking at the labels and how to determine what we're getting as far as dosage. We're going to talk about the difference between levels of quality of omega-3 supplements on the market. And we're going to talk about a project that you guys are doing that I think is pretty cool and that we're taking part in called the Coastal Cleanup. We'll wrap up with that. So first, let's just jump into this. Before we recorded, Nicole, I told you that I have my Vital 5. The Vital 5 is a great multivitamin, digestive enzymes, probiotics, magnesium, and omega-3. Now, there's 100 other supplements that could potentially be considered, really important and useful for a wide range of people. But this is what I came up with as the most universal list I could come up with, because we don't know everybody's health status and age and diet and, all that other stuff. But for me, omega-3 is about as big a no-brainer as there is, probably along with magnesium, where it's one of those things where it's just like, everybody probably needs to be taking this. We're just not getting enough in our diets, at least in very rare cases, especially in the center of the country where we are here in Utah, maybe a little more on the coast when where, fish is a little easier to get at a restaurant, that kind of thing. But then we also have to concern ourselves with the quality of the fish in restaurants because tons of stuff is farmed. And in our own home, of course, when we're buying it, it's a little bit tougher to get wild caught. It's more expensive. And even if it is wild caught, it's coming from a dirty ocean in many cases. I tell people from a dietary standpoint, probably the one sort of last big resource that we can count on when it comes to omega-3 is wild caught Alaskan salmon. And that's awesome, but you have to pay for it, right? So oftentimes supplements can actually be more economical when it comes to this as well. But tell me why you think, or if you think we're on the same page in terms of omega-3 being one of those core nutrients that just makes sense as a supplement for just about everyone.
You are totally correct about that. I mean, omega 3 fatty acids are one of the nutrients that have stood the test of time and can virtually support every aspect of human health. Their end destination is our cell membranes, where they support the structure and the function of every cell membrane in the human body. Now, whether we may be talking about our brain, our heart cells, or liver cells, EPA and DHA is supporting that across every stage of life. So, absolutely necessary for us to get an adequate amount on a daily basis. But as you mentioned, cold water fatty fish, algae, doesn't really land in the common American household plate as often as it should, which is why supplementation is a great alternative to really help fill in those nutritional gaps that we may not be getting via the diet.
Yeah, definitely on the same page there. And the thing is, I think is really critical here too, is that, you said that it's supportive of basically every process in the body, cellular health generally. Of course, we always talk about with omega-3 brain health and cardiovascular wellness and things like that. But also 85%, I think, is the number of disease in this country is inflammatory in nature. And omega-3 plays a major role in the proper inflammatory response inside the body. So for me, that's one of the single biggest reasons why it makes so much sense, because in the world, but especially in this country, in America, we're dealing with so much inflammatory illness that's something that is foundational in supporting your body in doing what it's supposed to do. Because inflammation is like hormones and like everything else in the body. We need it. We just don't need too much of it, right? And we also don't need too little of it. So supporting the inflammatory response in an appropriate way always makes sense.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, that's really one of the main reasons that consumers turn to omega 3 supplements to support healthy inflammation modulation. So many of us are dealing with a wide array of issues, and omega 3 fatty acids should really be the first area of support that we look for to provide our cells the nutrients necessary to provide that homeostasis, that balance at a cellular level.
Yeah, it's such a core thing for sure. Now, you told me something I had not heard before we started recording that I think is pretty exciting because every once in a while, and if anybody listens to Vitality Radio on a regular basis, you're going to know that as a general rule, I'm not overly excited about government recommendations when it comes to supplementation and things like that. But you told me that something's changed on the new safe and responsible dosage of omega-3. There's a European number and there's a American number, United States number, and I guess those numbers now line up. Is that right?
That is correct. So, as an overview, what's considered the health minimum maintenance dose is 500 milligrams of omega 3s. But when we looked at the European Food and Safety Association, they actually stated that up to 5,000 milligrams of omega 3 fatty acids were deemed a safe and responsible nutrient. And actually, on par, FDA now also states that up to 5,000 milligrams can be a safe and responsible amount.
And it used to be 3,000. Is that right?
That is correct. It used to be around 3,000 milligrams, and now they are on par with the European Safety Association at that 5,000 milligrams.
Yeah, and that's a long time coming for sure, because as we're going to talk about next, there are different doses that make sense for different things based on the research, right? And, again, before we started recording, we had a little conversation about this. And my take has always been, and people that listen to this show know this already, that 2,000 milligrams is a good spot for just general health and well-being, not knowing, what your diet's like and what your health status is and all that kind of stuff. Just based on the actual clinical research on human subjects, 2000 milligrams of omega-3 seems like a good level for most people. However, there's some really interesting research on higher doses for that, for brain health and mood balance, we'll say, mental health things, that kind of thing, also cardiovascular wellness and things like that. Pick a couple of things, studies that you've seen that would indicate a higher dose being beneficial.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, there's, of course, a lot of evidence based research on omega 3 fatty acids, over 50,000 published studies solely on EPA and DHA. One of my favorite one is on the healthy reduction of triglyceride levels, where they actually wanted to see how dose had an effect on research result. So, they broke apart the participants with a different dose in each group in order to see what the effect of that result was without having to modify their diet or lifestyle changes. And so the first group in the study was given 1,000 milligrams, second group 2,000 milligrams, and so on up until the last group got 5,000 milligrams of omega 3s.
Okay.
And very interestingly, what they found was the overview was the healthy reduction of triglyceride levels was between 9 to 51% reduction, basically highlighting that the individuals in the 1,000 milligram group saw an average of a healthy reduction of about 6 to 9%, while the individuals in the group with 5,000 milligrams of omega 3s actually saw a healthy reduction in triglyceride levels up to 51%, which really goes to show how dose has an effect on research results. And as you mentioned earlier, many of us are not consuming enough to create those health outcome changes, which is why it's so important to look at these particular types of research where we see how these increases are able to create these health outcomes without modifying much like our diet or lifestyle.
That's awesome. I mean, 51% reduction in triglycerides is crazy. Question I have on that, do you know how long that study was?
Yes, I believe that study went on for about 2.5 years.
Okay, so that was a long-term study over a significant group of people in different categories, and I have to assume you went from 1,000 to 5,000, but the numbers just kinda got progressively better with the higher doses?
Absolutely, and that's why I mentioned that as an overview. What the
Yeah.
conclusion of the study mentioned was that consuming between 1,000 to 5,000 milligrams of omega-3 had a healthy reduction anywhere between that 9 to 51%, but it really varied depending on the dose, creating that effect on research result.
Well, and it's interesting because there's a lot of things that you can do to have an impact on things that can be tested in the blood, like triglycerides. And, omega-3 definitely isn't alone in that. There are herbs and things that have shown to have benefit with triglyceride levels as well. But what I think is really interesting is when it comes to omega-3 as a foundational nutrient that the body requires anyway, taking 5,000 milligrams if someone's concerned about their triglycerides would also have this really cool collateral benefit of all the other things that come along with omega-3, right? Nourishment of the joints and the cardiovascular system and the brain and every cell in the body, really. And so you get all these side benefits as opposed to side effects like you might get with a pharmaceutical where you're trying to accomplish the same thing. And the higher dose is in most cases going to give you an additional benefit that you wouldn't normally get maybe with 2000 milligrams as more of a maintenance dose that a lot of people would take. I personally recommend a minimum of 2,000 milligrams, but and I don't have a specific thing, I guess, that I'm taking omega-3 for. I just take it because it's good for me and all the reasons that omega-3 is good. But I tend to err on the side of a little bit more. 3 to 4,000 a day is kind of my typical, depending on what I'm doing, from a supplemental dose myself. But that's a really interesting study that I had not seen before. Years ago, I was reading through a really interesting report that came from Harvard Medical School, I believe. And I actually reported on this on the show probably close to a decade ago now. And it highlighted that in the 5 and 6,000 milligram range, there is where some of the very best research was for mental health outcomes. Do you have any studies that you're aware of that fall into those higher doses when it comes to mental health and well-being?
Absolutely. So, when we talk about mental health and wellness, there's a wide variety of differentiators, even when we talk about omega 3s.
Hmm.
Typically, with brain health, we're looking at that higher dominance of DHA to support brain health.
Hmm.
Unless we are talking about key aspects like mood, where we do normally see it being a higher dominance of EPA.
Hmm.
But specifically, when we're looking at cognition, attention, or learning, one of my favorite studies is actually looking at cognition in age related individuals. And the study was actually looking at the supplementation of 2,000 milligrams of omega 3 fatty acids with a higher dominance of DHA to understand the difference in cognition within tasks that were asked to be performed prior to supplementation. So, for example, like spelling tests, etc., and then consume the particular dose for, I believe the study was about a 6 month period of time. And then they were asked to perform the same series again. In this particular study, and I don't think I mentioned earlier, we only had the participants and the placebo. So, what
Okay.
the conclusion actually mentioned was that the individuals in the participant group not only showed an increase in omega 3 index at the red blood cell level, but actually had better performance in all of the cognitive tasks that were performed prior to supplementation. So, even within age related cognitive decline, we're seeing a support with even 2,000 milligrams of omega 3s with that higher dominance of DHA.
Very cool. And then, are there any others that you want to share with some of the higher doses that have shown to be beneficial in human health?
I would say there's one other that comes to mind, and it's really on blood pressure regulation. And I think this is one big area that a lot of customers come into support for omega 3s. This other study was also looking at the upper high doses of omega 3 fatty acids. On average, between 3 to 5,000 milligrams were utilized. And what the conclusion of the study was that on average, the higher dose groups, basically those in the 4,000 or 5,000 milligram group saw an average reduction of about 20 to 40% in healthy blood pressure regulation levels. And that's a pretty big number when we're talking about not just blood pressure regulation, but it being one of the most touted research when we're looking for omega 3s and blood pressure regulation.
Yeah, that's awesome. How long was that study? Do you remember?
I do not remember that off the top of my head, but I want to say it was close to about a year, a little over a year, if I'm not wrong, but I might have to get back on you on that.
Okay. No, I was just kind of curious. That's really impressive for sure. So basically, I guess what I want people to get out of this is that there is sort of a standard dose, and according to the government, that's minimum is like 500 milligrams. According to me, it's going to be more like 4 times that much at 2,000 milligrams. But if there is a specific thing that you are trying to achieve with omega 3, whether it be balancing lipid levels, triglycerides, things like that, blood pressure, mental health, brain health, those types of things. Higher doses in many cases can be very beneficial, and it's a very 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 safe nutrient. And so experimenting and seeing what your body gets with it can be a very useful tool as well. I think some people, well, a lot of people, because I think it's human nature, will give up on things a little bit too soon. One of the reasons I'm asking Nicole about these length of these studies is because it's a core nutrient. It's
Mhm.
not a drug. It's something that your body uses over time to yield a long-term benefit. And sometimes you do have to play the long game with this kind of stuff to get the results that you're looking for and experiment with the doses to get where you want to be as well. You mentioned EPA and DHA, and that's got to be one of the very most common questions. Explain to my listeners what's the difference between these two things. They're both omega 3. If you look at the back of a bottle from a various brands, whether it be Nordic Naturals or any number of other omegas, or various sources like cod liver oil versus fish body oil and that kind of thing, you're going to see ratios that are quite a bit different in many cases. A lot more EPA, a lot more DHA. In some cases, you'll see formulas that are almost exclusively EPA or DHA. So explain to us the difference between the two and what people need to know about, making that choice.
Yeah, I would love to. I think this is one of the first areas where most of us really get to understand it's not just the two most important omega-3 fatty acids that do support every aspect of human health, but there is a way to distinguish and understand how to choose the right dominance based on our health outcome goals. So, the way that I like to loosely reference DHA as the neck up fat. When we're thinking neck up, we're thinking structure. So essentially, it is the building block to the brain, the eyes, and the central nervous system. The brain alone is made up of 60% fat, and of that fat alone, 20 to 25% is actually made up of DHA, which makes it the most prominent fatty acid of our neuronal cell membranes. Yet, that's not the highest concentration that's found in the human body. It's actually found in the retinas of our eyes at 35%. So this is why we do commonly see that higher dominance of DHA for products that are directed for mom and baby to support the most critical stage of growth and development, or for any school age year children that we're talking about attention, learning, focus, or even adults when we're talking about cognition, brain health, and memory. On the other hand, we do have EPA, that's more of a neck down functional fat, so, the functionality to our organ systems. The very first thing that always comes to mind for everybody, of course, is heart health, so cardiovascular health and function. But it truly goes well beyond that. I mean, we mentioned earlier, one of the reason individuals take omega-3s is they know it's great for inflammation modulation. And it does this because omega-3, specifically EPA, helps to support immune cells, both innate and adaptive cells. And it also supports digestive health, joint health. And the unique one that we touched on earlier was mood. So,
Yeah.
mood is typically associated with that higher dominance of DHA because of brain health. But the reason that research actually shows that EPA can be better suited for mood or mood disorders is because of that gut brain connection, specifically when we're talking about the HPA axis that helps to regulate cortisol. EPA also has a very unique role within that HPA axis. So, ironically, research shows that at least 60% higher EPA to DHA or 1,000 milligrams of solely EPA had the best mood exhibiting benefits. Now, both EPA and DHA are synergistic fats, but this information is just to better understand how we choose the right product based on our health outcome goals, or even really learn why the wide variety of products in our health food stores really have a particular higher dominance, for example, for mom and baby, really always having that higher dominance of DHA.
Right. Yeah, and that does, I know, trip up a lot of people. My take on it, and I'll be curious your opinion, is that we're meant to have both EPA and DHA. They both belong in the human body. They belong in different proportions in different areas of the body. You just mentioned 35%, DHA in the eyes, for instance. So I generally think it's probably short-sighted to just get one or the other on a long-term basis. In some cases, and I've actually seen this, Nicole, with mental health and some of my customers, that really high EPA can be extremely effective and fairly quick. And so in the short term, I think sometimes that can make sense. Over time, I think, having a good dose of both probably makes the very most sense because you're nourishing the widest range of areas of the human body. And, you've mentioned a couple of times, and I think it's critical that if there's a time that someone should be uber concerned about omega-3s, it is pregnancy and nursing because we have these amazing studies showing how critical that is to the brain development and ocular development and everything else of the baby and the child. And so that's a huge factor. And at that time of life, DHA, probably should be the dominant oil. Now, naturally, in what's called fish body oil, that's the most typical fish oils that are going to be on the market that come from things like anchovies and sardines and things like this, versus cod liver oil, which is the other kind of big one that's out there. You are going to see a ratio shift, right? Cod liver oil is higher in the DHA, fish body oil is higher in EPA, generally, unless they've been manipulated in some way. Why might someone consider cod liver oil specifically versus fish body oil or vice versa, would you say?
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that because cod liver oil essentially in nature is naturally rich in DHA, but also contains EPA and also naturally occurring vitamins A and D3, which really provide an effective synergistic benefit from pregnancy and beyond. So this is really where the whole omega-3 supplementation world really started is the classic award-winning cod liver oil.
Yeah.
However, individuals that might be looking for that higher dominance of EPA, as you mentioned, anchovies, sardines, mackerel, herring, in nature have a much higher dominance of EPA as a fatty acid profile in comparison to DHA, which is what you would commonly find in the Ultimate Omega, for example. And that also provides a much different ratio. Ultimate Omega provides about a 2-to-1 ratio of EPA to DHA, which is why I say it is the perfect go to product for basically anybody looking to supplement with omega-3 fats because it has that healthful ratio of both fatty acids. But that cod liver oil is unique because it is a single source just from the liver of the cod. It is sourced from the Lofoten Island in Norway, which does again provide that higher DHA than EPA and naturally occurring vitamin A and D3. So, great choice for that individual looking for higher DHA.
Awesome. I like that. And one of the interesting things, and I know there's research on this, but again, I didn't come prepared with studies, but maybe you've got something you can share with us. Uh, Way back when I was a teenager, and we were just, well, even before that, when I was a little kid working in this store, cod liver oil was the option. And there was one brand that was pretty much dominating the market back then. And the thing that people came in for it for primarily was actually people that were struggling with arthritis and inflammation issues. And they had great results with cod liver oil. So I'm curious what we know about the inflammation, joint health, those types of things when it comes to cod liver oil versus fish body oil. Is there a preference there?
So, when we're looking at the main difference, just any consumption of omega-3s will be beneficial, just making sure we're getting enough to our cell membranes. Now, if we are being very specific to supporting inflammatory states or the modulation of it, I would specifically look for a higher dominance of EPA in comparison to DHA that can really target the support of our immune cells to support the modulation of inflammation and create homeostasis and basically the balance at a cellular level. So, both or any omega-3s is a great choice, but I would opt for that higher dominance of EPA to support inflammation modulation.
Okay, so then in your brand, that would be one of the ultimate omega options would make the most sense because of that 2-to-1 ratio. And also, for people unaware of the brand, Ultimate Omega is a more concentrated form than just a typical omega-3, so there's less capsules to take. And now you even have stronger versions of Ultimate Omega. So there's some that are considered even like a 1 or 2 a day, which is nice. What about, I talked about cod liver oil, talked about fish body oil. Another one that we get a lot of questions about, and I'm sure you've got an opinion on, is krill oil. What do we know about this? Because it gets a lot of what I would consider to be, it's a little hypey in terms of how people talk about it. What's your take on it as far as the science and what you've seen?
Of course. So, krill oil, and the reason why a lot of individuals compare it to fish oil is because they consume it essentially for omega-3 fatty acids. The main issue that I see with krill is that it's very low typically in EPA and DHA, which is essentially what we are lacking in the Western diet. But krill oil is very rich in phospholipids and astaxanthin. And while they are great nutrients, we don't typically tend to be deficient in phospholipids or astaxanthin. And while it can be a great choice, we typically are not getting enough of the necessary nutrients EPA and DHA. That is why we do take an alternative to fish oil that is in the natural triglyceride form to ensure that we are getting adequate amounts. Now, phospholipids, of course, can increase absorption, which is why we do also at Nordic Naturals have formulas that have an increased absorption with herring roe to increase the amount of phospholipids. but alongside our award-winning fish oil.
Okay, so hadn't asked you about that before, but we come out on the same page there. Krill oil has some real health benefits for sure. The phospholipids are great. Astaxanthin's a fantastic antioxidant for sure. And it does have some omega-3s, but when you look at the dosage, the potency, and you look at the research, and then you mentioned something at the very beginning I think is really important, Nicole. The body of research with fish body oil and cod liver oil it's massive. It's almost unparalleled in nutrition, right? And yet we have kind of the newcomer to the market, so to speak, in the krill oil that has a little bit of research, and the research is pretty compelling. There's some good stuff there. But for me, until we have something that is a little more rock solid that would indicate that krill oil is somehow superior, when you look at the price versus the potency and the body of research, I err on the side of fish oil all day long over krill personally. So that's where I come out on it. What about quality? Now, of course, anybody I talk to that has a fish oil company that they represent is going to tell you that they've got great quality stuff. I will say that if you were here or you weren't, I would tell people what I tell people in my store every day when people ask. Nordic Naturals is a great quality fish oil that runs through all of the key, testing and verification and all that kind of stuff. You guys are doing it right. There are other great brands in the industry. We don't just carry Nordic Naturals here at Vitality. We carry other brands as well. But the big question I always get is, well, what about the stuff at Walmart or Costco or Target or whatever versus the stuff that's in your health food store? And then the big challenge with that is always, when people ask the person selling the thing if their stuff is the best, people are saying their stuff is the best. So help us understand, is there an actual difference in quality, potency, or purity, any of those things from, the kind of premium brands of fish oil versus the less expensive brands?
Absolutely. I mean, not all fish oil is created equal, and the way that it is manufactured is absolutely critical. So, one of the main areas that I always love to mention with omega 3 is ensuring that it is a wild caught fatty fish source, that it is manufactured in house under conditions that essentially are protecting the volatile omega 3 fatty acids, which is why we here at Nordic Naturals are so committed to delivering the world's most safe and effective nutrients that are essential to health. One of our biggest competitive advantages is that we utilize nitrogen throughout our entire process, from fishing vessel to finished product, to ensure the freshness and the palatability of our oil. Now, the second biggest competitive advantage of us here at Nordic Naturals is that every single one of our formulas is delivered in its natural form of fat. Now, most customers that are looking for omega 3 fatty acids are even unaware that the difference in fat even exists. So they're not necessarily looking for this information on their product label. But 98% of dietary fat is found in the natural triglyceride form. The only other 2% is cholesterol and phospholipids. So it's giving your body the fats in the way that it's used to recognizing it. Even algae, that is nature's original source of marine omega 3s, EPA and DHA, it provides it in the natural triglyceride form. Now, when we're talking about high concentrated products, as we've been talking about throughout the afternoon, we see two different forms of concentrated fish oil, either the intermediary ethyl ester or the re-esterified triglyceride. And that's one of our biggest competitive advantage. Even our high concentrates have gone through the re-esterification process to ensure that even our high concentrates are delivered in their natural form of fat, so that individuals that are seeking these higher doses, well over that 2,000 milligrams, can still ensure that they're getting those fats in their natural superior form of fat.
Excellent. And then do you have a recommendation? Because this is another question that I get quite a bit as to when people should take their omega 3 with meals, without, morning, evening.
So definitely always alongside a healthy meal, definitely always helps for digestion and absorption. Now, there is no standstill science on the perfect time to consume omega 3 fats, but there are many practitioners in the industry at a global level that do suggest that around the afternoon, usually around lunchtime, can be the most beneficial to support the best digestion and absorption, but no standstill science.
All right, fair enough. Okay, I think those are most of the questions I wanted to ask. Let's jump into our furry friends here. Nordic Naturals has a really cool and unique line of omega-3 based supplements for pets. And, cats and dogs primarily is, what we're going to talk about here. Although I think omega-3s can be beneficial for horses and a variety of other animals as well. What do we know about omega-3s and our pets' health?
Yeah, so you briefly mentioned it. I mean, just like humans, both dogs and cats need omega-3 fatty acids to basically support their health span. So basically, as we were mentioning, just like human health, we have both DHA or EPA dominant rich formulas. And depending on what we're trying to support, we can choose either omega-3 pet, higher in EPA, or the cod liver oil, higher in DHA. So for pets, for example, it can support puppy trainability, their fur and coat, in comparison to maybe that higher dominance of EPA to support equally inflammation modulation, to support joint health, which is critical as senior dogs age, as well with cats, joint health, digestive health, both EP and DHA support every cell of both dogs and cats, just like humans, which is why we do have a variety of omega-3 products that are made with the same award winning fish oil made for humans, just simply without any of the additives, for example, the flavors, and ensuring that they contain nothing like xylitol or any etc. that might be harmful for
Yeah.
pets.
All right, excellent. Yeah, and we've already had you've got a chew that I've got a customer that's been shopping with us for, my goodness, probably 25 or 30 years, has an old dog. And now I'm trying to remember the name of the chew, but they started buying it probably 6 months ago, 8 months ago, or something like that when we first started carrying it. And they said it's made a huge difference in their dog's ability to just get up and run around and not looking as old, looking a lot more spry since he's been eating those. So, certainly something that can be very, very useful for your pets as well. So you are doing something that I just found out about 5 minutes before we hit record. And as soon as I found out about it, read up on it, talked to you about it for a couple of minutes, I decided, hey, we're going to participate in this at Vitality Nutrition. It's called your Coastal Cleanup Program. Let's wrap up by talking a little bit about that. What are you doing over at Nordic Naturals as far as that goes?
We are absolutely thrilled to be participating in the California Coastal Cleanup Commission. It is a way to clean up our oceans and waterways and ensuring that at least once a year we meet with local organizer to help clean up the beaches. We've decided to make it bigger and better than ever before by helping our stores participate into our California Coastal Cleanup contest, where they're able to set different displays in their stores in order to win a trip to California to actually come clean up a local beach here in Southern California. And our winners will also be able to get the opportunity to get an exclusive behind the scenes peek of our San Diego manufacturing facility, where we do our liquid, soft gel bottling encapsulation, as well as our very own gummy manufacturing. So it's a really great way to show that we are committed to the health of our oceans and for future generations to come.
Very nice. Yeah, we're excited to participate. I mean, there's probably 1,000 plus stores that are going to participate in this thing, so we'll see if we win. But overall, the idea is let's do our part, to keep things clean. Especially the ocean needs all the help that we can give it when it comes to cleaning things up. So we're definitely excited to take part in that. And then you mentioned gummies. We're not going to dwell on it too much, but I will say this, Nicole. You probably never heard me talk about this before, but I tend to bag on gummies a lot because a lot of the gummies in the supplement industry have some real issues. One is, in many cases, they're putting things in a gummy that need more milligrams than they can fit in a gummy. And then a lot of times the gummies are made with things that aren't particularly healthy for you in the first place. There's a lot of issues with gummies, and yet there are good gummies on the market, a lot of good gummies on the market. It's just a mixed bag like everything else. And so I just want to throw this out there for people listening. If you're looking for good quality gummies in terms of the the nutrient content that's in the gummy, actually getting something in there at a high enough dose that it's going to help you. The flavor profile, because you guys are so good with that. Your gummies all taste delicious, and not having a bunch of negative ingredients that you don't want. Then if you are reaching for gummies, Nordic Naturals, definitely one of my favorite brands when it comes to gummies. They've nailed all those things. Good quality, good taste, no junk. So that's a good option for you as well. And I don't know that anybody does kids omegas better or more diversely than you guys do them. You've got so many different options, from gummies to liquids that actually taste pretty good, to a variety of different chewable things, including even little chewable soft gel capsules and things like that for DHA. And one more thing, because I thought about it 10 minutes ago and forgot to mention it, but I want to throw it in before we wrap this show up. You mentioned kids and brain health and attention and focus and all these things. I have a real concern with kids in our world today. They're malnourished, not in the way that you think of, starving kids in third world nations, but in so many other ways, they're malnourished because of everything from the soil to processed foods and all these different things. Nutrition is a real problem for kids these days, and brains need nutrition, specifically brains that are still growing, right? That haven't fully developed yet. And yet, the first thing off the list is often a pharmaceutical to try and help with focus. And these are pharmaceuticals that have a myriad of potential issues associated with them. One thing that I would like to close with, and then I'll get your opinion on this too, Nicole, is that if you are trying natural things for your kids' brain health and for focus and attention and things like that, it does oftentimes end up being a little bit of a longer game. We have to nourish the brain for a while for the brain to kind of catch up and get what it needs, especially with omega-3s. I see a lot of people giving up after a month on an omega-3 saying, I don't think it's really helped much. Please give it more time. The worst case scenario with your child is they're going to be healthier because of it. Best case scenario is you're going to see some real benefit in terms of, how their brain is actually functioning and how they're able to retain information and focus and all that kind of stuff. What have we seen, Nicole, with research and omega-3s in the developing brain in terms of the amount of time and the amount of potency that kids need?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the key areas where we're looking, where you not only mentioned they're the pickiest eaters, so naturally they're not getting enough of the nutrients needed. And even interestingly, so in the research, majority of the positive data supporting omega-3s for school age years are even sometimes as low as 650 milligrams of combined EP and DHA, showing support to attention, learning, and focus. So in reality, as you mentioned, it's maybe majority of us are just not getting enough of these nutrients, and turning even to a zero sugar gummy that provides 600 milligrams of total omega-3s can be a great choice for many parents to ensure that kids are getting an adequate amount to support the main key areas. We look at the CDC, they state that some of the most common reported behavioral symptoms in school age children is attention, learning, and focus.
Hmm.
And the majority of the research supporting a higher than 650 milligram dose of omega-3s says it supports school age years with attention, learning, focus, and retention of information.
Yeah. And what are we seeing as far as studies? Are these 12-week studies, 16-week studies, 6-month studies, that kind of thing? Because that's one of the biggest things. It is really, it's those two things, not giving your child enough and not giving it a long enough time to see the results. So what have you seen as far as the length of studies on average, I guess?
Yeah, so on average, the majority of these studies do take place between 3 months to about 9 years. So this is why we really kind of have to hang our hats on the randomized clinical trials, which are the gold standard in scientific research, where we can really see that differentiator in time or dose, so we can really see the effectiveness of that result or conclusion within the study.
Yeah, and that's why I always tell all parents that ask me, give it at least a few months. You're not going to hurt your kid with omega-3. It's going to be good for them regardless of whether or not you see it, right away out on the report card or any of that kind of stuff. But really play the long game with it. It's really, really important for their brain. And if we can do things naturally without resorting to pharmaceuticals, of course, that's going to be in the best interest of the child, at least in my opinion. So all right, Nicole, thank you so much for your time. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add before I let you go?
The last thing that I would love to add is that we are actually now the most studied brand in the EFA category. We are very proud that as science advancers, we are proud of that journey. We now have over 100 published studies solely on our omega-3 products.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's amazing. And again, you guys, to a very large degree, are pioneers. Things changed for the better in omega-3s when Nordic Naturals came along and kind of raised the bar for other brands. And I've always respected that and appreciated that. And it's one of the reasons that we've carried Nordic Naturals for all the years I think that they've been on the market, are pretty close anyway. So thank you so much for your time, for your expertise. Love to have you on again and maybe dial in on a specific thing like cardiovascular or mental health or something like that down the road. But I think this was a really good show, and hopefully people learned a lot from it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity and the continued support of the Nordic Naturals brand.
Absolutely. And for everybody listening, thank you for listening and for supporting this show with your time and your ears. And a quick reminder, we are officially finally on YouTube. By the time this show airs, we'll probably have been on for a few months, but I'm letting everybody know. And because we did get into the YouTube game a little bit late, I would love, even if you're not going to watch it on YouTube on the regular basis, you're just listening on your app, if you don't mind jumping over there and hitting subscribe. We are doing some fun things with little short videos with snippets of information that we think are very valuable, as well as the full show. If you'll go over there and support that, we would greatly appreciate it. Share the videos, that kind of thing. It will really help us to grow the audience. And of course, that means the world to me. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can call us 801-292-6662. That's 801-292-6662, or jump on our website, vitalitynutrition.com. We'll have links to all of the items that Nicole mentioned there. If you want to check out the pet stuff, the kids stuff, the cod liver oil, the ultimate omega, and so on, they'll all be there for you as well. Until next time, I'm Jared St. Clair, and this has been Vitality Radio. Thanks for listening to the Vitality Radio podcast. If this episode helped you, follow the show, share it with someone, and explore trusted education and resources at vitalitynutrition.com. See you next time.
Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Vitality Radio. Just a reminder that this podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast has not been evaluated by the FDA. This podcast is provided with the understanding that the information shared is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. This podcast is not a substitute for professional care by a medical professional. Thank you.